There comes a moment when the warmth in her words disappears, when her laughter no longer carries the same sweetness, and when her presence begins to feel like absence. You sense the shift, not because she says it out loud, but because silence speaks louder than words. When a woman distances herself and ignores you, it is never random. It is never meaningless. It is a test, a signal, and sometimes a revelation. The question is, will you recognize what her silence is truly telling you? When a woman begins to emotionally withdraw, it is often one of the most powerful yet silent signals you can ever receive, and it rarely comes without reason. Her emotional withdrawal is not something that happens overnight. It is usually a gradual process, a slow unraveling of the connection that once felt effortless and alive. In the beginning, her energy feels warm, responsive, and present, and you can sense the flow of her emotions in the way she looks at you, the way she responds, the way she gives without you asking. But when that warmth begins to fade, when her words become fewer, when her presence feels distant, even when she is physically near, it is not a coincidence. It is a shift in her emotional state, a deliberate turning inward that reveals something deeper. Women are naturally expressive, naturally connected to their emotions. So when a woman withholds that part of herself, it is because something inside her no longer feels safe or no longer feels inspired to give. Emotional withdrawal is her way of protecting her heart while simultaneously sending a message that something in the dynamic has changed. This withdrawal often shows up subtly at first. She may no longer engage in conversations the way she used to, or she may stop initiating moments of closeness and connection. You might notice her responses becoming shorter, her laughter less genuine, her eyes no longer lighten. G up in the same way they once did. And while it is easy to dismiss these changes as mood swings, the truth is that they are markers of distance, quiet indicators that the bond between you is weakening. Emotional withdrawal is not about silence alone. It is about the energy behind that silence. It is the heaviness in her absence, the lack of enthusiasm in her presence, the way she no longer invests emotionally because her heart is pulling away. This shift is rarely about her being busy or distracted. It is about her choosing not to give because she no longer feels the same reason to. The root of her withdrawal is often tied to how she feels within the relationship. Women thrive when they feel understood, valued, and emotionally secure. When those elements begin to fade, when she feels taken for granted, when she senses her emotions are dismissed, or when she no longer feels the depth of respect she once had, she instinctively withdraws. She does not argue endlessly. She does not always explain. Instead, she chooses silence because silence carries more weight than words. Emotional withdrawal is her way of showing that she is no longer fully invested, that she is reconsidering the connection, and that her heart is protecting itself from further disappointment. It is not an accident. It is her strategy of survival, her way of preserving her energy and dignity. What makes emotional withdrawal so difficult to recognize is that it does not always come with confrontation. Many men expect anger, accusations, or direct conflict when something is wrong. But women often speak through their absence rather than their presence. They stop showing up the way they once did. And that alone is the message. The problem is that many fail to notice until the silence has already grown into a wall. By the time you sense the distance, her withdrawal may already be deep, and regaining her trust or emotional investment requires more than empty words. It requires transformation, consistency, and proof that you can provide the emotional environment where she feels safe to open her heart again. When a woman begins to test your presence by pulling away, it is not always about rejection, but rather about observation, about quietly watching who you are when she is not constantly giving you her energy and attention. This testing is often misunderstood because many think it is a game, but in truth, it is her way of assessing the strength of the bond and the man she has chosen to invest her emotions in. A woman knows that consistency reveals truth. And when she withdraws a little, she pays close attention to how you respond. Do you panic when her attention fades? Do you chase her desperately? Or do you hold steady, grounded, and secure in who you are? This distance becomes her lens, a filter through which she can see your true character. Not when things are easy and flowing, but when her energy is not feeding you every moment. In these moments, your reaction speaks louder than anything you could ever say, and she learns more about your strength in silence than she ever could through words. This testing often shows up as her suddenly becoming less available, less eager to respond immediately, or less engaged in conversations. It may feel confusing because you remember how she once poured her time and attention into you, yet now she seems occupied, delayed, or detached. Many men make the mistake of interpreting this as disinterest, and they rush in with desperation, demanding her presence back, begging for reassurance, or trying to control her focus. But in doing so, they reveal insecurity, and insecurity is the very thing she is trying to measure. A woman pulls away not to punish, but to see if you can handle space, if you can remain calm without her constant validation, if you are truly rooted in yourself. She wants to know that your sense of worth does not collapse the moment she steps back. She wants to see if you still stand. Detour when her energy is not there to hold you up. At the heart of this testing is her need to feel that she can trust your strength. Women are drawn to men who do not lose their composure under pressure, who do not fall apart when things feel uncertain, who can lead with clarity even when her emotions are storming. When she withdraws, she is watching to see if you begin to doubt yourself, if you lash out with frustration, or if you remain patient, consistent, and grounded. If you panic, she interprets it as weakness. If you chase her excessively, she sees it as neediness. But if you remain calm, focused on your own purpose, and allow her the freedom to come and go without forcing or controlling, she recognizes a strength that earns her respect. This is the essence of her test to see if you are truly the kind of man who can be trusted to remain steady when life becomes uncertain. This dynamic can be deeply frustrating if you misinterpret it, but when understood correctly, it becomes clear that her testing is not about cruelty, but about seeking assurance that you are dependable. A woman does not want to carry the weight of holding you together emotionally. She wants to feel that she can lean on you, that you can be her anchor. When she distances herself, she is not only observing how you handle her absence, but also whether you use that space to remain productive, self-assured, and purposeful. She wants to know that your identity is not tied solely to her approval, but rooted in who you are as a man. The stronger and calmer you remain during her withdrawal, the more she feels reassured that you are not dependent on her for your stability, but instead a man who can lead with strength regardless of circumstances. When a woman begins to guard her vulnerability by distancing herself, it is often because she has reached a place where her emotions no longer feel safe to be expressed openly. A woman's natural state is to give, to nurture, to pour her heart into the connection she values. But when she senses that her openness is not protected or that her feelings are dismissed, she instinctively retreats into silence. Vulnerability for a woman is not about weakness, it is about trust. Every time she opens her heart, every time she expresses her emotions, every time she allows you to see the most fragile parts of her, she is taking a risk. And if that risk is met with neglect, judgment, or inconsistency, she learns to close herself off. This closing is not always loud or dramatic. It is often quiet, subtle, and hidden behind polite words or forced smiles. But beneath it is a deep withdrawal meant to shield herself from further emotional harm. Her silence becomes her protection, her distance becomes her armor, and her guardedness is the proof that she no longer feels, that her heart can be held without being hurt. Guarding her vulnerability often looks like her withholding the little, details she once shared so freely. Where she once expressed her dreams, her fears, and her insecurities, now she holds them back. Not because she no longer feels them, but because she no longer trusts that they will be received with care. A woman's vulnerability is the deepest gift she can offer, and when she senses that her gift has not been honored, she withdraws it quietly. This may show up in the way she stops confiding in you, the way she avoids deeper conversations, or the way she brushes off her own emotions with phrases like, "It's fine," or "Don't worry about it." These words rarely mean she feels nothing. On the contrary, they mean she feels too much, but she no longer believes she can reveal it safely. This is why distance and silence are her chosen forms of self-P protection, for they are the shields she can control when she cannot control how her heart will be received. The reason vulnerability matters so much in this dynamic is because it is directly tied to a woman's sense of intimacy. For her, closeness is not built only on physical presence, but on the emotional bond that comes from being truly seen and understood. When she closes off her vulnerability, she is essentially saying that the intimacy she once felt has been broken. She no longer feels the connection she once did, and so she hides behind distance to avoid the pain of giving what no longer feels valued. This act is not about manipulation, it is about survival. A woman cannot continue pouring into a space where her emotional depth is ignored, criticized, or mishandled. Guarding her vulnerability allows her to preserve her dignity and protect the most fragile parts of her being from being further wounded. This guarding also serves as a test of sorts. When she withdraws emotionally, she is observing whether you notice, whether you care enough to look beyond her silence, whether you can create the safety she needs to feel open again. She is watching not for grand gestures or dramatic words, but for consistency, patience, and understanding. If you respond to her guardedness with anger, frustration, or accusations, she retreats further into her shell. But if you respond with calmness, respect, and the space she needs, she begins to feel that maybe it is safe again to let down her walls. Her vulnerability is like a delicate flame. It cannot be forced. It cannot be demanded. It must be nurtured gently until it feels strong enough to burn freely again. When a woman distances herself to guard her vulnerability, she is silently asking whether her heart will be cherished or whether it will be left exposed to harm. When a woman begins to lose respect and connection, the distance she creates is not just physical, but deeply emotional, and it is one of the strongest indicators that something fundamental has shifted between you. Respect is the foundation of her attraction, the root of the admiration that fuels her desire to stay invested. When he respects you, she looks at you with trust, she listens to you with openness, and she willingly gives her energy because she feels inspired by your presence. But when that respect begins to fade, the connection that once tied her heart to yours starts to unravel silently. A woman does not always announce that she no longer sees you the same way. Instead, she withdraws, gradually removing her emotions piece by piece until what remains is only politeness, surface level interaction, and eventually indifference. This loss of respect is rarely about one single event. It is about repeated patterns, consistent disappointments, and moments where she no longer felt, seen, or led by the man she once admired. The signs of losing respect often show up in her tone and the way she engages with you. Where she once listened intently, she may now appear distracted or dismissive. Where she once valued your opinion, she may now challenge it with irritation or apathy. Where she once looked to you for guidance, she may now stop asking altogether, as if your perspective no longer holds weight in her eyes. These changes are not random. They reflect the crumbling of connection. Respect is not something a woman gives blindly. It is something she sustains when she feels consistently safe, guided, and inspired. When she pulls away, it is because that sense of safety has been replaced with doubt, that inspiration has been replaced with disappointment, and the bond she once cherished feels less worthy of her investment. The distance, therefore, is not only her retreat, but her unspoken acknowledgement that the foundation of the relationship has weakened. What makes the loss of respect so powerful is that it directly affects the way she sees you as a man. A woman cannot remain fully attracted to someone she does not respect. And the moment that respect fades, the emotional connection follows close behind. She may still remain physically present, but emotionally she is elsewhere, giving you fragments of herself rather than her whole heart. This is why when respect diminishes, the connection feels cold, mechanical, and forced. She does not argue endlessly because arguments require investment. Instead, she becomes quieter, less reactive, and more distant. She chooses indifference over confrontation because indifference is the clearest sign that her emotions are detaching. Her silence in these moments is not emptiness. It is the echo of respect that no longer exists. The root of this loss often lies in moments when she feels you no longer live in alignment with the man she believed in. It could be inconsistency, lack of ambition, failure to lead, or simply a gradual decline in the strength she once admired. Women notice details, and when those details repeatedly show weakness rather than growth, she begins to view you differently. This shift in perception changes everything from the way she responds to your touch to the way she speaks your name. The connection that once felt magnetic begins to fade, not because she chose to stop caring, but because respect cannot be forced. Once it slips away, her heart instinctively protects itself by withdrawing. And when that respect is lost, rebuilding it becomes one of the greatest challenges because admiration is not given on demand. It must be earned through action, consistency, and strength that inspires her to believe. Again, when a woman distances herself, your reaction in that moment becomes the defining factor that shapes the outcome. Because it is not only about what she is doing, but about how you handle the pressure of her withdrawal. Many men panic when they feel her slipping away. And in that panic, they begin to chase, to plead, to demand her attention back, thinking that more effort will force her to return emotionally. But desperation does not inspire respect. And when you react from fear, you confirm to he that your sense of stability is dependent on her presence. A woman does not want to feel like she is the anchor holding you together. She wants to see that you remain steady, even when she takes a step back. This is why your reaction in these moments is so critical because it reveals whether you are guided by confidence or by insecurity, whether you are centered in who you are or whether you collapse the moment she pulls away. Your reaction also communicates the value you place on yourself. If you respond to her silence with accusations, anger, or emotional chaos, you are showing her that your self-control is fragile, that you cannot regulate your emotions without her reassurance. This pushes her further away because it validates her reason for distancing herself in the first place. On the other hand, when you remain calm, collected, and patient, you demonstrate strength. You show her that your self-worth is not tied to her immediate attention, but rooted in your own foundation. A woman needs to know that the man she is with does not lose himself when she takes space. that he can handle distance without falling into desperation. The way you hold yourself in these moments either rebuilds her respect or erases what little remains, because she is not only watching what you say, but how you act when the dynamic is no longer in your favor. This is why it is often said that silence is a test, because it forces you to reveal the truth of your character. Anyone can appear confident when everything is flowing smoothly, but true strength is shown when her warmth disappears, when her attention fades, when her love feels uncertain. Do you break under that pressure, or do you stand firm, rooted in your own purpose? The reality is that your composure speaks louder than any words you could ever say, because it shows her that you are not driven by panic, but by certainty. And that certainty is what reignites her respect, because a woman cannot stay attracted to a man who loses his ground every time she creates distance. She wants to feel that you are stable enough for her to lean on, not unstable enough that she has to carry both her emotions and yours. Your reaction in these moments also determines whether the relationship has space to heal or whether it collapses completely. When she distances herself, she is often searching for clarity, for proof that she can still feel safe, respected, and inspired in your presence. If you respond with calm leadership, you create the possibility for that clarity to return, because your steadiness gives her the room to reconsider. But if you respond with emotional chaos, you close the door, because instead of reassuring her, you confirm her doubts. Your reaction does not need to be filled with speeches or grand gestures. It needs to be rooted in patience, boundaries, and inner strength. A woman respects a man who can allow her the space to process without forcing, who can remain composed without begging, who can lead without demanding. It is in your reaction that she sees whether you are truly the man she can trust when emotions become uncertain. And that alone decides whether her distance becomes the end of the connection or the beginning of renewed respect. When a woman creates distance, the moment eventually arrives where you are, faced with a choice that defines the future of the connection, whether you rebuild or whether you let go. This decision is not always clear, because the heart often clings to hope, while the reality is showing you signs that cannot be ignored. Rebuilding requires both the awareness to see what went wrong and the strength to address it with consistency, not just promises. Letting go requires courage, the ability to release something that no longer serves you, even though your emotions still want to hold on. A woman's withdrawal is never meaningless. It is either an invitation for you to step into growth and become stronger, or it is the final signal that the bond has run its course. The hardest part is distinguishing between the two, because when emotions are involved, the desire to fix often blinds you to the truth that sometimes letting go is the only path forward. Rebuilding begins with deep reflection, because you cannot repair what you refuse to acknowledge. If her distance came from neglect, inconsistency, or lack of respect, then rebuilding means addressing those weaknesses directly and proving through action that change is real. Words will not bring her back. Promises will not restore her respect. Only steady behavior can create the safety she needs to reopen her heart. Rebuilding is not about begging her to return. It is about becoming the kind of man she can trust again, the kind of man whose strength and leadership makes her feel secure. This process takes patience, because trust that has been broken does not heal overnight. She will test your consistency. She will observe your actions closely, and she will only lean back in when she feels your growth is not temporary, but a reflection of who you truly are. For rebuilding to work, you must be willing to transform, not only for her, but for yourself, because genuine change is never born from desperation. It is born from becoming aligned with the man you were always meant to be. On the other side, letting go becomes necessary when the distance is not about temporary disconnection, but about a complete loss of respect and admiration. When she no longer looks at you with the same light in her eyes, when her silence is not testing but final, when every attempt to rebuild is met with indifference, that is when letting go is the only choice that preserves your dignity. Holding on to someone who has emotionally checked out only drains you further because love cannot survive without respect and connection cannot thrive without reciprocity. Letting go is painful because it forces you to accept that the story you envisioned together is no longer the reality you are living. Yet in that ease lies the opportunity to reclaim your strength, to redirect your energy toward growth, and to prepare yourself for something greater. Sometimes a woman's withdrawal is not a call to chase, but a call to rise higher on your own path, free from the weight of a connection that no longer honors you. The truth is, both rebuilding and letting go require strength. It takes strength to face your flaws and rebuild with patience. And it takes strength to walk away when you know there is nothing left to save. The difference lies in her response. If she still engages, still shows signs of investment, still reacts to your energy, then rebuilding is possible. But if her silence is consistent, her distance unshaken, and her presence already gone, then letting go is the only path that protects your self-respect. Whichever choice you face, the outcome becomes a lesson, because her withdrawal was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal where you stand, who you are, and what you must do next to honor yourself and your future. When a woman distances herself and begins to ignore, it is never just about silence or absence. It is always about meaning, about signals, about truths that words often fail to express. Her withdrawal can come in many forms. The emotional retreat that speaks of a heart no longer feeling safe. The subtle testing of your presence to see if your strength is real. The quiet guarding of her vulnerability when she fears her emotions will not be honored. The painful loss of respect and connection that shifts the way she sees you. The critical moment where your reaction defines whether she will lean back in or walk away. And the ultimate crossroad of rebuilding or letting go. Every stage of her distance carries with it a lesson not only about her, but about yourself. It is in these moments that you are confronted with the truth of who you are. When love is no longer effortless, when connection is no longer guaranteed, when silence forces you to face yourself. A woman's withdrawal is not the end of the story. It is the mirror that reveals whether you have the strength to grow, the courage to remain grounded, and the wisdom to either rebuild what was broken or walk away with dignity. And in that choice lies the true measure of your character. For distance does not only expose her heart, it exposes yours.